The crimson dawn broke over Geneva as Admiral Kestrel Voss stepped onto the podium, her weathered hands gripping the edges of the lectern. Behind her, the flags of every Earth nation fluttered in the morning breeze, a tapestry of human unity that had taken centuries to weave. Before her, representatives from 47 star systems sat in rigid silence, their alien features betraying nothing of their thoughts. "Honored delegates," Voss began, her voice carrying across the assembly. All with the authority of someone who had commanded fleets through the void. "We gather today not in celebration, but in defiance." The hegemony's primary ambassador, a towering creature called Drakmor, whose crystalline exoskeleton caught the light like fractured diamonds, leaned forward. His translator unit crackled to life. "Admiral Voss, surely you recognize the futility of silence." The word cut through the air like a plasma blade. Voss's steel-gray eyes fixed on the alien. "For 300 years, humanity has bent the knee to your hegemony. We've paid tribute, accepted your protection, and watched as you strip-mined our asteroid belt while telling us it was for the greater good of galactic civilization." She gestured to the holographic display that materialized above the assembly, showing Earth's orbital defenses, or rather, the lack thereof. "You've kept us deliberately weak, our technology stunted, our ships barely capable of reaching our own moon without your permission chips. You've told us that aggression is unbecoming of a developing species, that violence has no place in the enlightened galaxy." A ripple of unease passed through the alien delegates. Drakmor's mandibles clicked rhythmically, a sign of agitation among his kind. "The hegemony has brought peace to 10,000 worlds. We have ended wars, prevented genocides. By neutering every species you encounter," Voss interrupted, "by making them dependent on your technology, your trade routes, your permission to exist." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "But there's something you never understood about humanity." The hologram shifted, revealing classified footage from Earth's history: the London Blitz, the beaches of Normandy, the siege of Stalingrad, the last stand at Thermopylae, images of humans fighting against impossible odds, dying rather than surrendering their freedom. "We are not a peaceful species," Voss continued, her voice rising. "We are a species that chose peace, and there's a universe of difference between the two. We could have conquered this planet a dozen times over in our history, but we chose cooperation. We could have turned our nuclear weapons on each other until nothing remained but radioactive glass. But we chose survival. We chose to reach for the stars." She stepped forward, and every human delegate in the room stood with her, a unified front that had been centuries in the making. 3 days ago, your hegemony issued an ultimatum: surrender our remaining autonomy, accept full integration into your empire, or face the consequences. You gave us 1 solar cycle to comply. Voss smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Consider this our answer." The massive screens around the assembly hall flickered to life, showing live feeds from across the Sol system. Hidden shipyards that had been constructed in the shadows of Jupiter's moons revealed themselves, their stealth fields dropping to show vessels of distinctly human design. Sleek, predatory things that looked nothing like the elegant curves of hegemony architecture. "Impossible," Drakmor hissed. "The technological restrictions were based on the assumption that we would follow your rules," Voss replied. 3 centuries of primitive human engineering, and you never bothered to check if we'd actually stopped innovating." She raised her hand, and the human delegates began filing out of the assembly hall. "The Sol system is now under human protection. Any hegemony vessel attempting to enter Terran space will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." The alien delegates erupted in a cacophony of protests, threats, and demands, but Voss was already walking away, her officers falling, in step behind her. The age of human submission was over. Captain Lyra Hawk felt the familiar tingle of hyperspace translation as her ship, the Defiance, dropped into normal space at the edge of the Sol system. 3 hegemony dreadnoughts hung in the void like sleeping giants, their hull plating still warm from their own translation. They had come, as expected. "Sensor sweep complete," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Nix Frost. 3 Dominator-class vessels, standard configuration. They're running active scans on our position. Hawk nodded, studying the tactical display. Each hegemony dreadnought was nearly twice the size of her heavy cruiser, their hulls bristling with energy weapons that could reduce a moon to cosmic dust. By every conventional metric, this should have been a massacre. The communication array crackled to life. "Unknown human vessel," came the synthesized voice of the hegemony commander. "You are in violation of galactic maritime law by operating a military vessel without proper authorization. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Hawk." Exchanged a glance with her first officer, Commander Zara Nightfall. The woman's dark eyes held the same cold amusement that Hawk felt. "Shall I respond, Captain?" "Open a channel." Hawk stood from her command chair, straightening her midnight blue uniform. "Hegemony vessels, this is Captain Lyra Hawk of the Terran Defense Force. You are trespassing in human space. Reverse course immediately, or we will be forced to take action." A pause. Then, what might have charitably been called laughter from the alien commander. "Captain Hawk, our sensor readings indicate you possess a single light cruiser. We are 3 fully armed dreadnoughts of the Hegemony Third Fleet. Perhaps you would like to reconsider your position." "Actually," Hawk replied, settling back into her chair, "I think our position is just fine. Mr. Frost, show them what a light cruiser looks like when humans build it." The Defiance shuddered as her experimental phase shift drive engaged. For a moment, the ship existed in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, flickering in and out of visible spectrum like a ghost. When it stabilized, the cruiser had tripled. In apparent size, her hull now bristling with weapon emplacements that hadn't been there moments before. "Dimensional pocket technology," Frost explained into the stunned silence on the comm channel. "We've been working with folded space for the past 50 years. Turns out, when you're not bound by hegemony technology restrictions, you can fit a lot more ship into a lot less space." The lead hegemony vessel's weapon systems began to charge. "This changes nothing. You are still outnumbered 3-1. Are we?" Hawk asked mildly. Space around the hegemony formation began to shimmer. One by one, human vessels decloaked, not just ships, but an entire fleet. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and at the center of it all, the massive dreadnought Retribution, her hull scarred from countless battles in humanity's hidden war of independence. "Stealth technology," Commander Nightfall announced, "another benefit of not following hegemony design principles. While you were building ships to look impressive, we were building ships to kill efficiently." The hegemony commander's voice had lost its confident tone. "This is impossible. Our intelligence networks—" "Your intelligence networks," Hawk interrupted, "were fed exactly what we wanted them to see. 3 centuries of playing the role of compliant subjects while we prepared for this moment." She leaned forward in her chair. "Now, I'll give you the same choice you've given countless other species. Leave, or we'll make you leave." The 3 dreadnoughts began maneuvering, forming a defensive formation. Their weapons came online. Energy, readings spiking across the spectrum. "So be it," the alien commander transmitted. "For the glory of the hegemony." The first salvo of plasma bolts streaked across space, aimed directly at the Defiance. Hawk watched them approach on the tactical display, her expression calm. "Countermeasures," she ordered. The Defiance's point defense grid came alive. But instead of traditional kinetic interceptors, streams of what looked like liquid metal erupted from hidden ports along the hull. The plasma bolts struck the metal streams and were absorbed, their energy dissipating harmlessly. "Adaptive armor," Frost explained over the open comm channel. "We studied every weapon system in your arsenal, then designed counters. Your plasma weapons are now obsolete. The human fleet opened fire. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. Human weapons, designed in secret and refined through decades of preparation, tore through hegemony shields like paper. Gravitational lances twisted space itself, crushing hulls from the inside out. Quantum torpedoes phased through armor to detonate, directly within enemy vessels. And when the hegemony ships tried to flee, they found their hyperspace drives mysteriously failing. Interdiction fields, Nightfall noted conversationally. Can't have you running away to tell your friends about this. Within minutes, it was over. 3 hegemony dreadnoughts hung dead in space, their crews alive but their ships crippled beyond repair. The alien commander's voice, when it came, was filled with disbelief. How? How did you advance so far without us knowing? Hawk smiled coldly. Because you never understood what you were dealing with. You saw a primitive species that needed your guidance. We saw prison guards that needed killing. In the obsidian halls of the Hegemony High Command, Supreme Overlord Vexithera paced before the assembled War Council, her serpentine form coiling and uncoiling with barely contained rage. The holographic reports floating before them painted a picture that should have been impossible. 17 fleets, she hissed, her forked tongue tasting the recycled air of the command chamber. 17 fleets sent to pacify a single primitive system, and not one ship has returned. General Korth, his insectoid features betraying nothing, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. The humans have clearly been preparing for this confrontation. Longer than our intelligence suggested. Perhaps we underestimated... We underestimated nothing! Vexithara's tail slammed against the deck with a sound like breaking stone. They are a barely spacefaring species. 3 centuries ago, they were throwing rocks at each other on their homeworld. Admiral Kythera, whose aquatic species had evolved, in the crushing depths of a gas giant's moon, rippled her chromatophores in disagreement. The tactical reports from the survivors suggest otherwise. These humans have developed technologies we've never encountered. Their weapons are unlike anything in our databases. The massive holographic display shifted, showing recorded footage from the few escape pods that had managed to flee the Sol system. The images were grainy, corrupted by some form of electromagnetic interference, but they showed enough. Human, ships that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, weapons that ignored conventional shielding. Worst of all, the efficiency with which they operated. No wasted motion, no hesitation, no mercy. They fight like they've been doing this for millennia, observed Warlord Nexus, his cybernetic implants glowing softly in the dim light. Every engagement follows the same pattern. They disable our hyperspace capabilities first, ensuring no retreat. Then they systematically dismantle our vessels without destroying them completely. They want prisoners. To what end? Vexithera demanded. Information, Kythera replied. They're learning our tactics, our technology, our fleet dispositions. Each captured crew provides them with intelligence about our operations. The Supreme, Overlord's eyes narrowed to slits. Then we give them nothing to learn from. Prepare the 5th Armada for deployment. Full strength, 200 vessels, including the fortress ships. If these humans want to play at war, we'll show them what 1,000 years of galactic conquest looks like. Ma'am, Nexus interjected, perhaps we should consider negotiation. The humans have demonstrated defiance. Vexithera cut him off. Nothing more. They've had 300 years to accept their place in the galactic order. They chose rebellion instead. Now they'll learn why the hegemony has ruled for millennia. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in a bunker that had been excavated by automated mining drones over the course of 2 centuries, Fleet Admiral Orion Kane studied the same tactical reports from a very different perspective. The red planet's thin atmosphere provided little protection from cosmic radiation, but the humans had learned to adapt to harsh environments long before they'd reached for the stars. They're massing forces, reported Intelligence Director Raven. Ashwood, her pale features illuminated by the glow of multiple holographic displays. Our deep space monitoring stations are picking up hyperspace signatures throughout the hegemony core worlds. They're pulling ships from garrison duties across the galaxy. Kane nodded, unsurprised. The hegemony had ruled through overwhelming force for so long that they'd forgotten how to adapt to unexpected threats. Their response was predictable. Throw more ships at the problem until it went away. How many? He asked. Conservative estimates put it at 500 vessels, Ashwood replied. Possibly more. They're bringing everything they have. Good, Kane said, earning a surprised look from his intelligence chief. The more ships they commit to this operation, the fewer they have defending their core worlds. On the display, a three-dimensional map of local space showed the disposition of human forces. It was a lie, of course. The real strength of the Terran Defense Force was hidden in dimensions that hegemony sensors couldn't detect. But the deception served its purpose. Phase 2 is ready for implementation? Kane asked. All strike teams are in position, confirmed Admiral Vera Stormwind, her scarred hands moving across a tactical interface with practiced precision. The deep strike vessels have been in place for 6 months, waiting for the order. Kane smiled grimly. The hegemony thought they were dealing with a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous, but ultimately doomed. They had no idea that humanity had been planning this war for 3 centuries, preparing not just to resist, but to win. Initiate Operation Prometheus, he ordered. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you try to cage a species that evolved by killing everything that threatened it. Across human space, sleeper ships that had been drifting in the void for decades suddenly came alive. Their stealth systems, perfected through centuries of secret development, kept them invisible to hegemony sensors as they began their approach to targets throughout the galaxy. The hegemony was about to learn that when humans declared war, they didn't just fight on one front. They fought everywhere. 12 light years from Sul, the hegemony fortress world of Kepler's Gate hung in space like a mechanical planet, its surface bristling with orbital defense platforms and docking bays that could accommodate the largest dreadnoughts. For 800 years, it had served as the primary staging ground for hegemony expansion into the outer rim. Its fall would be unthinkable, which was exactly why Commander Jackson Reaper had chosen it as his target. Signal from the Phantom, reported his communications officer, Ensign Nova Sterling. All strike teams are in position. Reaper nodded, his cybernetic eye interfacing directly with the ship's tactical systems. The Wraith, his stealth destroyer, hung in the shadow of an asteroid barely 2,000 kilometers from Kepler's Gate, invisible to the station's sensors thanks to technology that bent light around the hull like water around a stone. Defensive grid analysis? He asked. 1,700 automated weapon platforms, responded his tactical officer, Lieutenant Blaze Hawthorne, each one capable of destroying a cruiser-class vessel. They're arranged in overlapping fields of fire with no blind spots. Crew complement? 43 million beings, Sterling replied quietly. Mostly civilians, families of hegemony officers, merchants, support staff. Reaper felt the familiar weight of command decisions. The hegemony had built their fortress worlds by mixing military targets with civilian populations, counting on their enemies' reluctance to cause massive casualties. It was a strategy that had worked for centuries, but humanity had learned long ago that in total war there were no innocent targets. "Commence Operation Hellfire," he ordered. The Wraith and her sister ships began their approach, their stealth systems rendering them effectively invisible. But instead of targeting the station's weapons or power systems, they headed for the massive docking bays where the hegemony's Fifth Armada was preparing for deployment. 200 warships, the pride of the hegemony fleet, sat in neat rows awaiting their departure orders. Their crews were aboard, their weapons loaded, their hyperspace drives charging for the long journey to Sol. They never saw the human ships coming. The first explosions rippled through Docking Bay Alpha as quantum mines planted by human infiltrators. over the course of months, detonated simultaneously. The chain reaction was spectacular. Fuel lines ruptured, ammunition stores cooked off, and the artificial gravity generators failed in cascading failures that sent ships crashing into each other like toys in a child's tantrum. Bay Alpha is gone, Hawthorne reported. 96 vessels destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Bay Beta and Gamma are following suit, Sterling added. The mines are working perfectly. Reaper watched the destruction through his ship's sensors, feeling no satisfaction in the carnage. This wasn't victory, it was necessity. The hegemony had made the choice to treat humanity as a threat to be eliminated. Now they would learn what it meant to be eliminated in return. Phase 2, he ordered. The Wraith fired her single shot, AE, gravitational lance that punched through Kepler's gate superstructure like a needle through cloth. But instead of causing immediate destruction, the weapon delivered its payload deep into the station's core, a dimensional destabilizer that began eating away at the artificial gravity systems that held the massive structure together. Evacuation. Alarms are sounding, Sterling reported. They're launching escape pods. Let them, Reaper replied. They'll carry word of what happened here. That's the point. As the human strike fleet vanished back into hyperspace, Kepler's gate began to tear itself apart. The gravitational fields that had maintained its structural integrity for 8 centuries collapsed in a cascade failure that would be visible from neighboring star systems. The message was clear. Nowhere in hegemony space was safe. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as human strike teams emerged from hiding places they'd occupied for decades. Shipyards burned, supply depots exploded, and communication relays went silent in a coordinated campaign of destruction that left the hegemony reeling. But the most devastating attack came not from military action, but from the careful dissemination of a single piece of information. On the hegemony capital world of Nexus Prime, Supreme Overlord Vexithara stared at the reports streaming in from across her empire. In a single day, humanity had demonstrated that the hegemony's 1,000-year reign of terror had created enemies everywhere. The Outer Rim worlds are in open revolt, reported General Korth, his mandibles clicking with anxiety. The humans have been supplying them with weapons and technical support for years. They're declaring independence from hegemony rule. The core worlds, Vexithara demanded. Holding but barely, Admiral Kithera replied. Our fleet strength has been reduced by 60%. Morale is collapsing among the outer garrisons. But the worst news came from Warlord Nexus, whose cybernetic systems interface directly with the hegemony's vast intelligence network. Supreme Overlord, we've detected a massive data breach. The humans have accessed our central archives. Vexithara felt her blood chill. What did they take? Everything, Nexus replied grimly. Fleet dispositions, garrison strengths, planetary defenses, supply routes. But most critically, he paused, his cybernetic eye flickering. They've released the hegemony historical archives to the public networks of every species in the galaxy. The silence in the command chamber was deafening. The historical archives contained the true record of hegemony expansion, the genocides, the forced relocations, the deliberate suppression of technological development among subject species. Information that had been classified for 1,000 years to maintain the fiction that the hegemony was a benevolent galactic government. How long before the information spreads? Vexithara asked. It already has, Nexus replied. The humans used our own communication networks against us. Every species in the galaxy now knows the truth about hegemony rule. As if summoned by his words, emergency signals began flooding in from across the empire. Rebellions were erupting on worlds that had been peaceful for centuries. Species that had served the hegemony faithfully were turning on their overseers, with a fury that had been building for generations. The hegemony was discovering what humanity had always known. that an empire built on fear and oppression contained the seeds of its own destruction. All it needed was someone willing to light the fuse. 3 months after the first shot was fired at Sol, the war had transformed from a simple human rebellion into a galaxy-wide revolution. In the command center of the lunar base Armstrong, Admiral Kestrel Voss studied the tactical displays with the satisfaction of a strategist whose decades of planning were coming to fruition. "Status report," she requested, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she gazed at the holographic representation of local space. 17 more systems have declared independence from the hegemony in the past week, reported Colonel Axel Ironwood, his augmented arm interfacing directly with the intelligence networks. The Verdani Collective has formally joined the alliance, bringing their biotechnology expertise. The Christek hierarchy is providing quantum computing resources. And the hegemony response? They're pulling back to core systems, replied Commander Zara Nightfall, who had been transferred from the Defiance to coordinate multi-species operations. Intelligence suggests they're preparing for a last-stand defense of Nexus Prime. Voss nodded, unsurprised. The hegemony had ruled through overwhelming force and psychological intimidation for 1,000 years. When faced with an opponent who refused to be intimidated, their tactical doctrine had proven woefully inadequate. "What's the status on Operation Ragnarok?" she asked. "All elements are in position," Ironwood replied. "The Liberation Fleet's report ready for final phase implementation." The plan was audacious even by human standards. Instead of laying siege to the hegemony capital world, humanity would offer the hegemony leadership one final choice: surrender completely or watch their empire burn around them as every species they had oppressed rose up to claim their freedom. "Ma'am," interrupted Communications Officer Echo Maverick, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Nexus Prime. The Supreme Overlord wants to negotiate." Voss raised an eyebrow. After 3 centuries of refusing to acknowledge human autonomy, the hegemony was finally ready to talk. "Put her through." The main display shimmered, revealing the serpentine form of Supreme Overlord Vexathera. Her scales had lost their lustrous sheen, and her eyes held the haunted look of someone watching their world collapse. "Admiral Voss," she began, her translator rendering her hissing speech into coldly precise English. "I believe we may have misunderstood each other's positions." "Really?" Voss replied mildly. "What gave you that impression? The 17 fleets you lost trying to pacify Sol? The 43 systems that have declared independence? Or the fact that half your empire is currently in open rebellion?" Vexathara's hood flared slightly, a sign of agitation among her species. "The hegemony is prepared to offer humanity full membership status, equal representation in the Galactic Senate, access to all hegemony technologies, trading privileges." 3 centuries too late," Voss interrupted. "You had your chance to treat us as equals. Instead, you chose to keep us as pets. Now you want to negotiate from a position of weakness." "You don't understand," Vexathera hissed. "Without the hegemony, the galaxy will descend into chaos. Wars between species, territorial disputes, technological regression. We've prevented all of this for 1,000 years. By crushing anyone who disagreed with you," Voss replied, "by keeping entire species dependent on your technology, by suppressing innovation and independence wherever you found it." She leaned forward, her steel-gray eyes boring into the camera. "You didn't prevent chaos, Overlord, you just delayed it." "Then what do you want?" Vexathara demanded. "Unconditional surrender," Voss replied without hesitation. "Complete dissolution of the hegemony government. Immediate withdrawal of all occupation forces. Full reparations to every species you've oppressed. And the trial of all hegemony leadership for crimes against galactic civilization." The Supreme Overlord's eyes narrowed to slits. "And if we refuse?" "Then you'll discover what humanity learned during our own dark ages," Voss replied. "That empires built on oppression don't fall gradually. They collapse all at once, usually taking their leadership with them. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the command center in silence. Voss turned to her staff, seeing the mixture of anticipation and concern on their faces. "Ma'am," Nightfall ventured, "are we really prepared to follow through on that ultimatum? The casualties could be enormous." "Commander," Voss replied, 300 years ago, humanity made a choice. We could have remained a species of warriors, conquering and destroying everything in our path. Instead, we chose to become something better. We chose cooperation over domination, peace over conquest. She gestured to the tactical display where the positions of hundreds of allied species were marked in blue. But that choice was conditional on the rest of the galaxy respecting our decision. The hegemony chose to treat our restraint as weakness. They're about to learn the difference. "All fleets report ready," Ironwood announced. "Operation Ragnarok is green for implementation." Voss took a deep breath, feeling the weight of species history on her shoulders. Humanity had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment, not just militarily, but philosophically. They had debated the ethics of total war, the morality of regime change, the responsibility that came with the power to reshape galactic civilization. "Execute Ragnarok," she ordered. "But remember, we're not the hegemony. We don't destroy what we can liberate, and we don't kill what we can capture. Our goal isn't conquest, it's justice." Across the galaxy, human fleets and their alien allies began their final advance. But this time, they weren't alone. Freed from hegemony oppression, dozens of species were discovering their own capacity for resistance. The galaxy was learning what humanity had always known, that freedom was worth fighting for, and that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to wage war against those who would destroy it. The hegemony had made the mistake of thinking that because humans had chosen peace, they had forgotten how to fight. They were about to be reminded that the most dangerous enemies were those who fought not for conquest, but for survival. The ruins of Nexus Prime stretched to the horizon, broken spires and shattered domes, testament to 1,000 years of hegemony rule that had ended in a single day. Admiral Kestrel Voss walked through the debris-strewn streets, alongside representatives from 47 species, each one bearing witness to the end of an era. "The Senate building is completely destroyed," reported Commander Zara Nightfall, consulting her tactical scanner. "No survivors among the hegemony leadership." Voss nodded grimly. In the end, Supreme Overlord Vex Athara had chosen to fight rather than surrender, turning the capital world into a fortress that had taken the combined might of the Allied fleets 3 days to crack. The hegemony leadership had triggered their own facilities' self-destruct rather than face capture, taking their secrets and their crimes with them into the void. "Ma'am," called out Dr. Stellar Phoenixborn, the xenobiologist who had been studying hegemony technology for the past year, "you need to see this." She led them to what had once been the hegemony's central archive building. The structure was mostly intact, its quantum-hardened storage systems having survived the bombardment. But what Dr. Phoenixborn wanted to show them wasn't in the archives themselves. "We've been analyzing the hegemony's historical records," she explained, gesturing to a holographic display that showed a timeline stretching back millennia. The hegemony didn't start as a conquering empire. They began as a defensive alliance formed by species trying to protect themselves from a greater threat. "What threat?" asked Ambassador Rex Stormheart of the Verdani Collective, his plant-like features rustling with curiosity. "The Devourers," Dr. Phoenixborn replied, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. A species that consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space behind. The hegemony originally formed to fight them. She manipulated the display, showing ancient star charts marked with zones of devastation. The war lasted for centuries. The hegemony won, but at enormous cost. Entire species were exterminated. Whole sectors of space were left barren. The survivors were so traumatized by the experience that they decided the only way to prevent another such catastrophe was to ensure that no species could ever become powerful enough to threaten galactic civilization again. So they became the threat themselves, Voss observed. Exactly. They started by disarming aggressive species, then moved on to suppressing technological development, then to outright conquest. Each step was justified as necessary for galactic security. By the time they realized what they'd become, it was too late to change course. The implications hung heavy in the air. The assembled representatives exchanged glances, each recognizing the same uncomfortable truth, that the power they now wielded could just as easily corrupt them as it had the hegemony. Which brings us to the question, said Voss, of what comes next. They had gathered in the ruins of the old Senate chamber, where for 1,000 years hegemony overlords had issued decrees that determined the fate of species across the galaxy. Now, representatives of those same species sat in the rubble, trying to decide how to rebuild galactic civilization without repeating the mistakes of the past. The Terran proposal is simple, Voss continued. No single species controls galactic governance. No central authority with the power to suppress technological development or impose its will on unwilling populations. Each species maintains its sovereignty, and cooperation is voluntary. But who mediates disputes? Asked Representative Flux Mindweaver of the Christek hierarchy, their quantum-coherent thoughts manifesting as shifting patterns of light. Who enforces agreements? Who protects smaller species from aggressors? We do, Voss replied. All of us. The alliance that defeated the hegemony doesn't disband. It evolves. We become a true federation, with each species contributing according to their abilities and receiving protection according to their needs. And what prevents us from becoming the next hegemony? Demanded General Talos Grimshard of the Pharaoh Draconic. Clans, his metallic scales glinting in the dim light. This, Voss said, gesturing to the ruins around them. The knowledge of what we've done here, the memory of what we've fought against. She stood, her weathered features reflecting the weight of command. Humanity didn't destroy the hegemony to rule the galaxy. We did it to free the galaxy. Our job now is to make sure it stays free. The debate continued for hours, but gradually a consensus emerged. The new galactic government would be decentralized, with each species maintaining local autonomy while contributing to collective defense and scientific advancement. Technology would be shared freely, but no species would be forced to accept it. Disputes would be mediated by rotating councils drawn from all member species. Most importantly, there would be safeguards, regular reviews of governmental power, term limits for all positions, and a constitutional provision that any species that felt oppressed by the Federation could leave freely, without penalty. The Galactic Federation of Free Worlds, Voss announced as the provisional constitution was signed. May it serve the galaxy better than what came before. As the representatives dispersed to carry the news to their homeworlds, Voss found herself alone in the ruins of the old Senate chamber. Commander Nightfall approached, carrying a data tablet with the latest reports from across the galaxy. The colonies are stabilizing, she reported. Trade routes are reopening. The former hegemony worlds are adapting to self-governance better than expected. And humanity? Voss asked. Already withdrawing from most of the occupied systems, Nightfall replied. As promised, Admiral Kane is overseeing the transition of the defense fleets to Federation control. Voss nodded, satisfied. Humanity had kept its word. They had fought not for conquest, but for liberation, and now they were proving it by stepping back from the power they had won. Ma'am, Nightfall continued, there's something else. Long-range sensors have detected anomalous energy signatures in the outer rim, signatures that match the hegemony's historical records of devourer technology. Voss felt a chill run down her spine. How long? Unknown. Could be years, could be decades. But they're coming. Voss looked out at the ruins of Nexus Prime, then up at the stars visible through the shattered dome above them. Humanity had won its freedom and helped free the galaxy from the hegemony's oppression. But their greatest test might still lie ahead. Then, "We'd better be ready," she said quietly. "All of us. Together." In the depths of space, ancient sensors stirred to life for the first time in millennia. The Devourers had slept long in the void between galaxies, waiting for the psychic screams of war to wake them from their hunger dreams. The fall of the hegemony had sent ripples through dimensional space that carried farther than any hyperspace transmission. They were coming home, but this time they would find a galaxy united not in fear, but in defiance. A galaxy that had learned the most important lesson humanity had to teach, that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be willing to fight for it. The age of human submission was over. The age of galactic freedom had begun. And when the darkness came again, it would find not a divided galaxy of subjects and overlords, but a federation of free worlds ready to stand together against the night. The stars themselves seemed to burn brighter at the thought.